Welcome back, Speed Freaks, to F1 Break Check. Corey and I have survived the long, cold winter break, and we are ready to go full throttle into the 75th season of Formula One. On today's episode, we will have a discussion of who we think are the greatest drivers to ever strap into an F1 car. We will also hit up the news, such as it is, that has happened since the season-ending test at Abu Dhabi. So grab a drink and settle in. F1 Break Check is on the starting grid.
Welcome. You are listening to F1 Break Check, the epic podcast for all things Formula One, where we discuss technology, history, news, and perspective. With your hosts, Scott Vick and Corey Broom.
We're back with F1 Break Check. With me, as always, is my ride or die, my pundit for life, my brother in arms, Corey Broom. Corey, how are you doing today?
Good. It's been a long week already, and there's so many things on my to-do list that I'm not getting to on my to-done list. Never ending, man. How about you?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same way. My to-do list keeps getting longer, and my done list has not budged
Right.
since we got back from the Christmas break. So
Yeah,
it has been brutal, and it just seems like every time I start to get into a groove or anything, something else happens that takes my focus away, and it has sucked. So
Yeah.
I'm glad for the little bit of a distraction with getting to talk Formula One with you.
Yeah, definitely. And Friday we get to hang out in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll getting forward to looking forward to getting to do that as well.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely.
Yeah, haven't seen each other since before the Christmas break, so
Yeah.
this will be nice.
Yep, right on.
All right then. So there hasn't been a ton of news since the Abu Dhabi test, other than we've gotten a couple of little things, but we'll kind of hold all those for a full roundup for next week. Really, about the biggest news that I wanted to talk to is once again Ferrari has shown Ferrari under Fred Vasseur has shown just what a class act they have really become in all of the various gifts that they gave Carlos Sainz as going away presents after the end of the season. So have you seen all of these?
I haven't seen all of them. No, I've seen a few.
Okay.
I really like the way that this is going back a little bit, but how they honored him and his dad. So I thought that just again, just complete class act.
Yeah.
But anyway,
so
go
that's
ahead.
the first thing that we're going to talk about is the fact that Ferrari not only did something to honor Carlos, but they did something to honor his father, because as most of you will remember, Carlos Sainz is actually Carlos Sainz Jr., and Carlos Sainz Sr. is a multi-time world rallying champion as well. So he's quite an accomplished racer in his own right. And Ferrari did them the service of letting Senior drive this year's Ferrari Formula One car at the Fiorina test track, and Carlos Jr. got to drive on the Fiorina test track in the 2022 model of the Ferrari F1 car. But both drivers got to go out on the Fiorina track at the same time. Yeah. And so it was just an amazing, in Carlos Jr.'s own words, it was just an amazing day. And he just was so over the moon in the way that Ferrari treated, his dad, to such an incredible experience as his going away party. Yeah. So I thought that was just total class act on Ferrari's part.
100%. I totally agree. Just thought it was such a cool thing that they did that to them,
Yes, absolutely. And then on top of that, his going away present from Ferrari was a Ferrari Daytona, the modern Daytona, but it had been completely customized out with his number 55 on the car, as well as Smooth Operator was emblazoned across the air intakes. So it's just truly a one of one Ferrari that they took and gifted to him as his going away, which I thought was just truly incredible. Just the attention to detail and everything that Ferrari did in making it literally just a one of one Ferrari, and it was so super special. And you could tell just by that from the pictures, just the ear to ear grin that Carlos had.
Yeah.
So I thought that, even though, I mean, you can't fault Fred. We've talked about it before, in previous podcasts, but you can't fault Fred for jumping at the opportunity to have a 7-time world
Yeah.
champion
Absolutely.
driving for you. And, it's never been any secret that Leclerc was the number one. So something had to give, but to show that there was no acrimony on either party's, you know, part of the Sainz and Ferrari splitting ways, and the fact that Fred has left the door open to
Yeah.
say that there may, could possibly, that the door is always open, that if the time is right, that Sainz has a place at Ferrari again, which is so unusual to see, even in this day and age in Formula One, that a lot of times when a driver moves on, there's a little bit of
Animosity.
acrimony
Yeah.
and everything, and they they sometimes they will say things or do things that kind of slams that door shut,
Hmm.
and sees to it. There's been very few instances where a driver has left a team and gone on to another team where he's been not just allowed back but welcomed back,
Yeah.
like I
Exactly.
think Signs would be.
Right. Right. No, and it just goes again. It goes to the leadership there, that because when they dismissed just about everybody else. I mean, look at Vettel, Kimi Raikkonen. They were let
Hmm.
go, and it was not a good split.
No.
Vettel's last few races, I'd say last almost a year, when he was let go from Ferrari, man, he just got to the point where engineers weren't talking to him. It was basically it was almost a question, why are you out on the track at that point? And this time, not at all. They
Yeah.
had him in strategy meetings. They had him all the way through. And there's no ill feeling from either one of them. But
Yeah.
you're right. I mean, Vasseur had to jump on this, because could you imagine if, say, if this wouldn't happen at Red Bull, but say one of the other top tier teams that Hamilton goes to, and people know that Fred could have gotten to him. I mean, that would have been just disastrous. you
I
know?
guarantee that even Red Bull, if they had had the opportunity to have Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton at the same time in the same car, they would have jumped at it as well.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know,
I
man,
don't think.
because he's pretty, Horner's pretty loyal to Max, and Max does not get along with Hamilton at all. So I don't know.
Nope.
Maybe not. I don't
I
know.
don't. I don't know. I just don't see that there's any way that Hamilton could have gone to. I firmly believe that Hamilton could have gone to any team on the grid and said, "Hey, I want to drive for you," and they would have made it happen.
Yeah, yeah.
I really do.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. As I wrote this the other day, I think it'll be very interesting if Hamilton wins his 8th championship at Ferrari. If he wins that, displacing Michael Schumacher's, 7th, I just think it'll be very fitting that he's with Team Ferrari if he does break that record.
Yes. Yes. All right. So, shall we move on?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Last week, Corey wrote a very, very interesting article that he posted on our website, f1breakcheck.com, where he took and kind of listed his own opinion of the greatest Formula One drivers of all time. And so I thought it would be kind of interesting that as we're gearing up for a new season of Formula One, that we would kind of debate this, because I disagreed with a couple of them. And I also kind of disagreed with a couple of them, the order in which he put them in. So I thought it would be really interesting for the two of us to take and discuss it. So, with that in mind, Corey listed at his number 6, which I'm going to kind of call our honorable mentioned slot. For the honorable mention, he listed Fangio. So, I wanted to kind of get a take on what was your thinking behind putting Fangio at number 6?
Yeah, it was a tough call. As soon as you said I didn't agree with, because when you and I were chatting, you said I didn't agree with some of your choices. As soon as I read that from you, I was like, I didn't say Mantle. I should have said Mantle in that.
For
Like,
those of you who have not been a longtime listener of the podcast, it is no secret that I am an enormous fan of Nigel Mansell. So, which is in doing my list, he was my honorable mention in number six.
yeah,
But anyway, so go ahead.
yeah. So for me, I just like the way that obviously it was a little bit before my F1 time, but I just really like the way that he characterized and how he was able to carry that championship or 5 championships,
Yeah,
championships underneath him. It just and the thing about him too was he did it at different times, so it wasn't like 5 consecutive. So that to me really shows that it's the driver that's really moving that forward and getting those championships. It's not only the car. Whereas you can make an argument, say recently within the last decade or so, that the reason why a lot of these people are winning so many consecutive championships is because of the car. Whereas
yes.
when you see that break in time and he's not winning every single one, that's an indication that it's not always the car. And for me, that's why I chose him to be basically number 6. But again,
Well,
after you said that, I was like, oh man, I should have said Mansell.
well, but I do think that Fangio is an excellent choice because you are right in the fact that, he won his first championship and then there was a 2-year drought and then he won his next 4 championships. But the thing that to me, because I put Fangio at number 5 on my list.
Oh wow, yeah, all right.
And yeah. But to me, the thing that, like you were just saying, is it really was because he was such an incredible driver,
Yeah.
because the fact that he won championships for 4 different manufacturers is part of what made him such an incredible driver and why he belongs up there in the pantheon. Because you have to remember that he didn't win, because like you were just saying, it's like you've got some drivers that they only won their championships with a with a single constructor, and it was because they either had the best car, or maybe not the best car but the second best car, but their talent was able to mask the deficiencies of their car over maybe a rival's car. See Max Verstappen in
Yep.
2024,
Yep.
not he probably didn't even have the top 3 best cars, but he
Exactly.
still, because of his early season form, being such an unbelievable drives, and then also look at his masterclass in the wet at Brazil in
Oh yeah.
2024.
Yep.
But the fact that Fangio won for Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Mercedes, and Ferrari, 4 different
Yeah.
manufacturers over 5 different years, is just nothing short of astounding. And so that's the reason why I put him in at number 5 on my list. So
Nice.
I
Very
thought
cool.
that, it was a very good choice.
Yeah. Right
So
on.
it's definitely one that I agree with. So, all right. So for on your list, you put Michael Schumacher at number 5. So
That was a
what was your
tough
thinking
one.
behind?
Yeah. So that
I'm
was a tough
sorry.
one because I thought about flipping him and Hamilton. Putting Hamilton more in the 5th place. Um, Schumacher. I think that the reason why I put him at 5 was a couple of the issues that you brought up earlier. I think it was earlier this year. We were talking about Schumacher and some of the things that you didn't particularly like about him. Some of the, I won't say cheating, but say skirting the edge of the rules,
Pushing the envelope.
pushing the envelope. So
Pushing the envelope of reality.
yeah, so that really played in my mind, and that's really why I would say I put him a little bit further down on the list versus where I think most people would put him, like 1 or 2 or maybe even 3. I put him more at 5, mostly because around those issues that you brought up earlier in the year.
Well, yeah. Now, see, the thing is, though, is that I put him, he is number 2 on my list.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And because I did overlook, because, and most people know, who have been listening for any amount of time or who know me, know that I am not a very big Michael Schumacher fan. First of all, I will probably, even to this day, I still have not forgiven him for the move at Adelaide in 1994, in which he lost the car, damaged the car, but then took Damon Hill out just simply, in order to protect his own world championship. I don't know that, because I'm such a huge fan of Damon. I don't know that I'll ever be able to forgive Schumacher for that one. But I took all of the other, skirting, and dancing on the edge of reality and things like that. I put that aside because
Okay.
the fact of the matter is, again, he was able to win championships with 2 different manufacturers.
Yep.
He had, a 4-year hiatus between his
That's true too.
last championship
Yep.
with Benetton and his first championship with Ferrari.
Mhm.
The fact that, even when he, was at Benetton, his first championship at Benetton, he did not have the best car by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
It was, everyone will very quickly acknowledge that Williams had absolutely the best car in the field in 1994. But it was just simply because, well, I say that at the end of the year they had the best car, and that was part of the reason why they won the constructors in '94. But the first couple races, before the tragic passing of Senna, the car was not very good. But it was only after about race number 6 in the season that the Williams really came on strong.
Yep.
But even at the beginning of the season, Benetton didn't have the best car. Well, I mean, even throughout the rest of the entire year, and they were using, the Ford customer engines at that time. So, the fact that he was to pull out such a commanding lead, and if not for his 2-race suspension during the 94 season, he would have won the championship by a pretty large margin, as
Wow.
opposed to winning by a single point. But then when he went on to Ferrari, it took a number of years of him working with the team to make the car and the team into the juggernaut that they became. And then, he reels off 5, championships after that, but I do, so I that's the only reason why I rank Schumacher so much higher, and then also because he did, break Fangio's record of
Yep.
5 championships, and coming in, with 7 championships in the end.
Yeah. No, all makes sense.
All right.
Completely
Yep. So
understandable.
at number 4, you had Lewis Hamilton, the modern day maestro, as you wrote, which I think is a pretty apt description of Hamilton. And I had him ranked at number 3, right behind Schumacher,
Yeah.
only because, again, Schumacher, even in his time at Ferrari, did not always necessarily have the best car, but it was just his incredible talent is what was able to elevate, him to the championships and everything. So you're thinking behind, though, Hamilton.
I mean, what do you say to Hamilton? I mean, yeah, he did have arguably the best car for most of his championships.
Mm-hmm.
So even with that being said, he was still, or is still, a phenomenal driver. I mean, look at how well he can take care of his tires, and think about his strategies behind making sure that, when he is ahead, that he can keep the people behind him.
Mm-hmm.
He has a tremendous amount of strategy. He has a tremendous amount of knowledge of the track and how the car behaves, and just that's the reason why, I was calling him the maestro, so to speak, is because he knows how to operate that car inside and out.
Yes.
It sounds a little cheesy, but it's almost like they're one when he's driving, right? And a lot of these drivers have that same capabilities, right? But
Yes.
he's really phenomenal about just getting every ounce out of that car. So that's why
Yes.
when there's degradation that he had, last couple of seasons at Mercedes, that's why it kills him so much, is that he's used to getting more out of that car. And
Hmm.
we've seen that he just hasn't been able to do that now.
Yep. No, I totally agree with you. So the only reason why I put Lewis, behind, Schumacher was only because Schumacher was kind of the record breaker and Hamilton came afterwards. But the fact that he was able to win, championships with, two different manufacturers, because a lot of people forget that he won his first championship
Yeah.
with McLaren, and it was arguably, and it was not the best car that year. Ferrari had the much better car, hence the reason why they won the constructors championship. And Hamilton, but Hamilton, because of his strong showings and everything, was able to win the driver's title, so and like you said though, but even as we've talked about on a number of occasions, that it takes a certain little extra something for someone to be a world champion. And
Yeah.
even, you know, the best driver in not necessarily the best car can win a championship, whereas maybe the best car, even with a, not the best driver, they're never going to win a championship, even if they have the best car available to them,
Right.
on the grid. So the fact of the matter is that Lewis, can take and do extract maximum potential from any car he steps inside of.
Yeah.
So that's part of, the reason why, I mean, he's still, in the top five
Easily. Yeah. Yeah.
easily. So far, the first couple that we've talked about have been no brainers. Now, the next one, number three, this is the one where I took and I had a little bit of an
Oh,
exception with,
okay.
so in your number three slot, you have Nicky Lauda. So take me through your three. I mean, he is a three-time world champion, and he did again. He also did it for two different manufacturers, and the fact that he won for both Ferrari and McLaren, as a driver. But take me through your thinking on that.
So for me, Lauda represents everything that I think a driver really should be. So when he first went to Ferrari, and obviously he's talking to people that don't know, but when he first went to Ferrari, Ferrari was not a powerhouse. He helped them become that powerhouse. So he had not just the driving knowledge, but he also had the engineering knowledge. So he was able to talk to the engineers. He's able to talk to the mechanics and say, hey, this is wrong. That's wrong. We need to improve this. So he, in my mind, is that whole well-rounded version of a driver, what they should encompass. Not just being able to be the fastest on the track, but also be off track, being able to tell engineering, hey, this is what's happening. Whatever. The brakes are failing at this point when I do this, or I need more camber, or I need whatever. That to me is,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really why, despite him only having 3 championships, that's the reason why I put him on this list, is because he has that well-rounded, or I should say, why he had that well-rounded knowledge that I think that really most drivers should encompass. I mean, Schumacher had that too.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think he was definitely one of the greatest, but it's like in trying to figure this out, I there was a lot of criteria that has to go into, and again, that's part of the reason why these are fun to debate,
Yeah, yeah,
is
yeah,
just
yeah.
simply because it's taking one person's perspective as opposed to another person's perspective, which I think is really really awesome. And and if we were doing a top 10 list, then Nicky Lauda would definitely be on my list as well. I mean, he'd probably been number 7 or 8 on my list, just not only because, like you said, was he was a phenomenal driver, or let me see. He was a phenomenal driver, but a lot of, with Lauda, he was not necessarily always the most talented driver, but like Mansell, he was able to extract more
Yeah.
from the car, a, because of, like you said, because of his engineering, but also just out of sheer force of will.
Yeah.
Lauda, and there are certain types of drivers that they may not have all of the accolades,
Right.
but they were able to do amazing things with the cars just through sheer force of will, because they just said, you are not going to beat me on
Yep.
this given day. Nobody is going to beat me. There's been a number of drivers that were like that. Piquet, Mansell,
Mhm.
Lauda, Even in his heyday, James Hunt was that same way. That's the reason
Sure.
why Lauda and Hunt had so many fierce battles and
Yeah.
everything, was because they both just had that mindset of nobody is going to beat me. We're going to go into this corner and either I'm going to pass you or I'm going to crash. One of the two. There is no third option here. It's,
Yeah.
it's all or nothing. That's the reason why, James Hunt, would, if we were doing this list strictly on just the largest balls on the grid, James Hunt would be at the top of the list. I do think that Lauda definitely deserves a place in the pantheon. I just didn't put him in the
That
top
high.
five just simply
Sure.
because of who I put in there as my number four, which was Jackie Stewart, and
Yeah.
it's
See,
only
I've thought
because
about Stewart as well. Yeah.
yeah. And see, and the only reason why I put, Stewart was also a three-time world champion,
Mhm.
but he did all three of them, for the same quote unquote team, but not in the same chassis, because his first constructors, or I'm sorry, his first world championship came in as the works team. Tyrrell was the works team for Mantra, and then later on became a full constructor, and that's when he won his last two, was Tyrrell as a full constructor. But Stewart had a understanding of the car's dynamics that even to this day, I don't even think a lot of the drivers, on the grid today really, they all have a fairly good understanding, but nobody really ever had that maybe Lauda, maybe Schumacher, maybe Prost, there's only a handful, maybe
Yeah.
Fangio, who understood the dynamics of the vehicle to such a huge degree, but at the same time could very easily explain it to even where just a layperson could understand what they were talking about. There was
Yeah.
a YouTube video that just recently resurfaced that there was a BBC interview that Stewart did back when he was still driving in his heyday, of where he is explaining the dynamics of the car to the interviewer, and he is doing it in such a way that anyone with even a minute amount of understanding of how a car works and everything could easily understand what he was talking about. And so that's why I put him up there. And also because of not just his driving ability, but also his ability to rally the troops, if you will,
Sure.
in the other drivers he was looked around and he saw so many of his friends, either die or, permanently injured and things like that, and he was able to rally all of the drivers, and bring them together to say this is ridiculous. There are things that we can do to make the car safer, to make the track safer, and if we band together as drivers, we
Yeah.
can get
Yeah.
the FIA and Formula One to change what they're doing and make the so that maybe because at the time that Stewart started the Formula One Drivers Association, they literally were losing sometimes 3 4 drivers in a season, and that was just normal. And it was so ridiculous. And if you start counting things like Formula 2 and Formula 3,
Hmm.
there was even more drivers that were dying, and or being permanently maimed or injured, and things like that. And Stewart was the one who had the foresight not to say, this isn't right. We've got
Yeah.
to do something here. We have the ability. Let's do something. And and being able to bring all the drivers together to as one voice, is part of what made him such an incredible driver and an incredible person. So that's part of the reason why I put Stewart in at number four on my list.
Nice. Nice.
All right, so number two, you have Sebastian Vettel.
Oh, come on.
Which
Anybody
okay,
who,
which I knew that he was going to have to be on this list because much like anyone who's been listening to this podcast for any period of time or who has ever talked to either Corey or I, Corey has an affinity for Sebastian Vettel that is right up there with my affinity for Nigel Mansell.
Yep.
And, and so I'm going to let Corey explain to the audience why he picks Sebastian Vettel as number two.
A few things, right? I mean, obviously, in his heyday, his driving capability was bar none. There's
Yes.
no beating it.
Second to
And
none.
yeah, I mean, you could argue that he had the fastest car and everything like that, but he did. But like you were saying earlier, you have to be a great driver, but also have a fairly decent car. Well, he had both, and that's why he was able to defeat so many really top line drivers at the time and win those four championships. I mean, he was just a beast. And then off track, he was able to help with engineering, just like what we were talking about before. He was able to help with engineering, with the mechanics, and he was also able to be the voice of the drivers as well. So he really encompassed everything that you'd want in a F1 driver.
Now, you said, the thing about, him having the best car, but the really, in hindsight, the car that he drove to his first championship,
True.
really, it was a really good car, but it was really, really fragile. And it did have a number of issues. So, when he won his first championship in 2010, he had 10 poles that year, so the car was lightning fast,
Yeah.
especially in his hands. But he only won 5 races, but it was on the strength of his 10 podiums
Right.
that, and 3 fastest laps that, he was able to clinch that championship. But it went right down to the wire.
Yeah.
It went right down to the last round, of the season.
Yep.
And the same thing with his third championship in 2012. Again, it was another year where he only had, 5 wins, but again, another 10 podiums, and a number of fastest laps, and he didn't clinch it until right down until literally until the very into this, last race of the season. So he didn't necessarily, he had the fastest car, but it may not have necessarily been the most reliable,
Right.
or the best, on tires, or things like
Yeah.
that, where he would slip back in the field. It's like
Right.
he could, you know, over a single lap, all 4 years that he won the championship, there was nobody better over a
Right.
single lap than Sebastian Vettel. It was only in a couple, a number of instances where the car let him down,
Yeah.
and so, but he was still able to muscle the car along, so I mean, I disagree with, with you that Sebastian Vettel, it belongs right there in the pantheon, but he would probably be more like my 9 or 10.
Oh
But I
yeah.
totally understand your thinking behind it, and I love it, and I will support it for as long as anyone's willing to listen.
Right on.
So, all right. So now on number one, you and I were both in perfect agreement with, which,
How
if
could you not
anyone
be? I
else
mean,
were to ever
honestly.
say, anything otherwise, I would tell them they were wrong and I would disagree.
Yeah.
So at number one, you and I both have the late, great Ayrton Senna.
Yep. Yeah.
So I
I
will
mean,
go through, I've talked before about, my love for Senna and
yep.
everything, but, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I want to hear from you why you think Senna is the greatest.
Just look at what he was able to accomplish in just his short lifespan. And when I say lifespan, I mean inside of it, Formula One. He
Hmm.
just was phenomenal. He was a beast. He was able to, get around the corners faster than anybody had at that time. He was able to see the track in a different light, especially the drivers in that period. Um, and really going back to his karting days, just drilling and drilling and drilling, very much like what. And he didn't make the list, but Max Verstappen, you would see that in him, and I really see him probably making that list here soon. But I really see that tenacity where he just would, he'd fail and then he'd just keep going and going until he succeeded, and just that type of work ethic really went a long way. So that's really the reason why I picked Senna. And just watching, some of the clips from his earlier years, just was a phenomenal driver. Just really exciting to watch all the way through. And
Yeah.
he had no shortage of competition. I mean,
No.
the people that he was racing against are literally on this list,
Yes.
and people that are really, really solid drivers. So it wasn't like he was going up against a bunch of Formula 2 drivers. These were
Yeah.
truly great drivers.
Oh yeah, I mean, literally at that time, you literally had a who's who
Yep.
of the greatest drive, some of the greatest drivers in history. I mean, at that time, he was racing against the PKs,
Yeah.
the
Oh, yeah.
Mansells, the Schumacher. In his last couple years, he was racing against Prost.
Yep.
Four-time world champion. I mean, it was there, like you said, there was, and there was no shortage of talent. And even other that were on the grid at the time. You had Martin Brundle at the time.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
had John
Yeah. That's right.
Lacey. You
Yep.
had Gerhard Berger. You had literally, I mean, that was at a time where, on any given weekend, you had, 8 or 10 drivers that if they had the right car, they could win a race,
Right.
and it was just, there was just a absolute glut of talent in Formula One at that time that he was racing against and beating on the regular.
Yeah. 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 He was an amazing driver.
He
Really, life
was.
got too short.
I know we've talked about it before on here,
Mhm.
but if you have not seen it, I implore anyone listening to this, go onto YouTube and find Jeremy Clarkson's retrospective. So I believe it was either the 10th or the 15th anniversary of Senna's passing in that fateful crash at Imola in 1994. On the anniversary of it, Jeremy Clarkson for Top Gear did a retrospective on Senna, which to me is probably still the definitive retrospective on the great man. And Clarkson's closing line is that after putting together that film, he was fully convinced that Senna was the greatest that had ever lived. And still to this day, even 30 years past, 30 years after his passing, he still resonates
Yeah.
in the sport, not just in the sport, but in, the collective consciousness of the world in a way that is reserved for very, very few other people. Michael Jordan, people who truly not just revolutionized their sport, were incredible ambassadors for their sport,
Yeah.
but they transcended their sport in the collective consciousness
Yeah.
of people around the world. They were known not just for their sport, but also for, who they were, their humanitarian work, or just their just general, they rose above their sports. Like I said, there's only a handful of people that, you can really put into that category, and
Yep.
Senna was one of them. I know that we will see a talent like Senna at some point. And there's been a couple, drivers who were right up there, with him. Max is approaching that category.
I agree.
Lewis is probably pretty close, because Lewis is, especially now, he's really starting to become like a Senna like in the fact that he is doing so many things outside of the sport to make the world a better place,
Mhm.
to help, encourage diversity and things like that, that he is starting to, really, and some people would say he already has, but he really is transcending his sport, and he's really becoming known outside of his sport, for, other reasons and things like that, so that he's getting to be close to that same level that Senna was at,
Yeah.
but as far as talent goes, I know at some point we'll see somebody, with as much talent as Senna, but I don't know when.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to take, and who knows, Max Verstappen just recently announced that he and Kelly Piquet are expecting their first child together. that might be the one.
Nice one.
But yeah, so just I think without any question, Senna is right up there. And one of the other things too, though, that Clarkson talked about in his film and has been mentioned a number of times other places is that Senna had the ability to get into what drivers refer to and a lot of other, and other, athletes in other sports refer to not just as in the zone, but in the flow where, and it's really more, geared towards racing because where you get into what they call the flow, which is where you're able to, you're just so inch perfect, able to move through the track, almost like you don't even have to think about it. And Senna was absolutely the best at doing that. There were times where he was so in the flow that he literally would climb out of the car and could not remember the lap. He would blast the lap record.
Yeah.
He would completely blitz the field, and he would literally climb out of the car and have no recollection of what he had done because
Wow.
he was just so in the flow
Sure.
that he didn't even have to even think about it. It was literally like you were saying about Hamilton, about being one with the car. Senna was one with the car to a
Oh, no
degree
doubt about
that
it.
I don't think we've ever, I don't, at least
Yeah.
was until now, we have never seen the like of since
Right.
then. We've seen a couple that were close,
Yeah.
you know, Hamilton, it can get there at times, Alonso in his prime, really, there was a few times where he could be like that, but it's just, there was times where he just transcended, the physical realm in
Yeah.
his driving
Yeah.
ability.
Right.
So you think we should, so what do you think? Should we wrap it up?
I think so. I think we're good.
Okay. So that was fun. That was really
Yeah,
fun.
I
I
liked it.
really
Yeah.
enjoyed that. It's a really great discussion, and
Totally.
it's sometimes it's fun to go back and debate these.
Yeah.
The first episode of 2025 has drawn to a close, and Corey and I are ready to hit the trail. Join us next week on an all-new episode as we run up to the new season. Until next time, he's Corey, I'm Scott. We're the pundits of F1 Brake Check. Let's go!
Thank you for listening to F1 Brake Check. If you have enjoyed what you heard, don't miss a single episode by hitting that subscribe button in your favorite podcatcher, or you can watch the video version on YouTube. Help us grow by sharing us with your friends and fellow F1 fans. You can contact us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, TikTok and X at F1 Brake Check. Our website is f1brakecheck.com, where you will find links to all our content. We value your passion and your feedback, so please take a moment to review our podcast. Your reviews help us grow and improve, and it means the world to us. Share your thoughts, rate us, and let us know how we can make the show experience even better. F1 Brake Check is a production of Brake Check Media. For your hosts Scott Vick and Corey Broom, until next time, keep yourself inside track limits, and try not to pitch it in the kitty litter.